There are moments when a story changes before you even realize you are standing inside it. Somewhere, in a place you cannot see, a conversation has already happened. A name was mentioned. A memory surfaced. And someone who has been carrying questions about you finally found themselves sitting across from a person close to you, trying to understand what they could not understand alone. What happened next was not what your soulmate expected. They thought they were going to hear something simple. Perhaps a casual detail about your life. Perhaps a harmless memory. Perhaps one small piece of information that would help them make sense of the distance between you. But when that person looked at them for a long moment before answering, something in the room changed. Your soulmate noticed it immediately. The conversation became quieter. Their hands stopped moving. Their expression changed. And then came a sentence your soulmate was not prepared to hear. I don't think you really know what happened. That was the moment everything became different. Because your soulmate had been building a story in their mind. They had been filling empty spaces with assumptions, interpreting silence, remembering certain moments while forgetting others. They believed they understood why you pulled back, why you became harder to reach, why certain words were never spoken. But the person sitting across from them knew something they did not. And suddenly, your soulmate had to face an uncomfortable question. What if the version of the story they had been believing was incomplete? They leaned forward. Then tell me, they said quietly. What am I missing? For a few seconds, there was nothing but silence. Outside, traffic moved along the street, headlights sliding across the window. Somewhere nearby, a phone vibrated against a table and stopped. But neither person looked away. The person close to you took a breath. I promised myself I wouldn't get involved, they said. But I think you deserve to know. Your soulmate felt their chest tighten. Not from fear. From recognition. Because deep down, there had always been one question they could never answer about you. Why did you seem so strong while carrying so much? They remembered moments that had seemed ordinary at the time. The way you sometimes changed the subject when conversations became too personal. The way you smiled even when your eyes seemed tired. The way you could make everyone else feel understood while revealing almost nothing about what was happening inside you. Your soulmate had noticed those things. But they had never understood them. Now someone else was about to explain. And perhaps the most surprising part was that the person telling the story was not trying to defend you. They were trying to help your soulmate see you accurately. You should know something about them, they said. Your soulmate waited. They cared more than they ever admitted. That sentence landed differently. Because your soulmate had spent so much time wondering whether you cared at all. They had replayed conversations late at night, searching for hidden meanings in ordinary words. They had wondered whether your silence meant indifference. Whether your distance meant rejection. Whether the connection they felt was something they had imagined. And now, someone close to you was telling them the exact opposite. But there was still something being held back. Your soulmate could feel it. There's more, they said. The person across from them looked down. Yes. What is it? Another pause. Then came the first twist. You weren't the reason they walked away. Your soulmate froze. Because that changed the entire story. They had believed that something they said had damaged everything. They had blamed themselves for the distance. They had wondered whether one wrong decision, one poorly timed message, one moment of hesitation had cost them the possibility of something meaningful. But the truth was more complicated. The person close to you explained that there had been a period when you were trying to make an important decision about your own life. You were not simply choosing whether to move towards someone or away from them. You were trying to figure out whether you could trust your own heart again. And that was something your soulmate had never known. They stared at the table. So they never told me? No. Why? The answer came softly. Because they didn't want you to feel responsible for what they were going through. Your soulmate looked away. For the first time, they began to understand why your silence had never felt cruel. It had felt protective. You had been carrying something privately because you did not want your uncertainty to become another person's burden. And suddenly, memories began returning with different meanings. A message you had written and deleted. A conversation that ended sooner than expected. The moment you almost said something important but changed the subject. The day you seemed unusually distant, even though nothing obvious had happened. Your soulmate had interpreted those moments as signs that you were losing interest. But perhaps they had been signs that you were fighting an entirely different battle. Still, one question remained. Why had you never trusted them enough to tell them? The person close to you seemed to know that this was coming. Because, they said, they were afraid that if you knew how much they cared, you would feel obligated to stay. Your soulmate slowly looked up. What? They didn't want you to stay because you felt sorry for them. They wanted you to stay only if your heart genuinely chose them. Silence. That sentence reached somewhere your soulmate had kept protected for a long time. Because suddenly, they realized something painful. They had been waiting for proof that you wanted them. Meanwhile, you may have been waiting for proof that they wanted you freely. Two people. Two fears. Two silent questions. And neither had been brave enough to ask the other directly. But the conversation was not finished. Your soulmate leaned forward again. There has to be a reason you're telling me this now. The person close to you hesitated. I almost didn't. Why? Because there's something else you don't know. The atmosphere changed again. This time, your soulmate did not speak. They simply waited. The person across from them reached for their phone, stared at the screen for several seconds, then placed it face down again. I saw something recently, they said. What did you see? A message. Your soulmate's expression tightened. From who? The answer came slowly. From them. Your soulmate stopped breathing for a second. They had no idea there had been a message. No idea that someone close to you had seen it. No idea that words existed somewhere that might explain everything they had been unable to understand. What did it say? The person across from them looked directly into their eyes. I'm not sure I should repeat it. Please. Another silence. Then, quietly. They said they were afraid you had already moved on. Your soulmate looked down. And something inside them broke open, not dramatically, not loudly, but in the quiet way a locked door finally gives after years of pressure. Because they had been afraid of the exact same thing. They had wondered whether you had found someone else. Whether your life had continued without them. Whether the connection had mattered only to them. And now they were hearing that you had been wondering the same thing. But then the person close to you added something that made the situation even more complicated. That wasn't the whole message. Your soulmate looked up immediately. What else did they say? This time, the person hesitated longer. Because the final part was not something they had expected to reveal. It was personal. It was vulnerable. And it could change what your soulmate believed about the entire relationship. Finally, they whispered. They said there was one thing they never told you because they were waiting for the right moment. Your soulmate's voice became almost inaudible. What thing? The room seemed to become impossibly still. And then the person close to you finally answered. They said that if you ever came back into their life, they would not ask you to explain the past. Your soulmate stared at them. They would only ask you one question. What question? The person took a breath. Then they revealed the words that your soulmate had never expected to hear. Do you still believe there was something real between us? And suddenly, every assumption, every unanswered message, every moment of distance seemed to point toward one unfinished conversation. But there was one final detail. One detail the person close to you had been holding back because they knew it could change everything. They looked at your soulmate and said, "There's a reason I'm telling you this today." Your soulmate's heart began racing. Why today? The answer came softly. Because they asked me to give you something. And from inside their bag, they slowly pulled out an envelope. Your soulmate recognized the handwriting before the envelope even reached their hands. Their fingers trembled. Because this was not an old message. It had been written recently. And on the front were only a few words. Read this when you're ready to know the truth. Your soulmate looked at the envelope. Then at the person sitting across from them. And for the first time, they understood that the conversation they had just walked into was never really about the past. It was about what was about to happen next. They opened the envelope. But before they could read the first line, their phone suddenly lit up. One new message. From you. And the message contained only 6 words. I think we need to talk. My beloved child. For a few seconds, your soulmate simply stared at the screen. The message was still there. I think we need to talk. 6 words. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that explained what had happened. Nothing that answered the questions now racing through their mind. Yet somehow, those words felt heavier than the envelope resting between their fingers. They looked toward the person who had brought it. Did they know you were meeting me? The answer was immediate. No. That changed the atmosphere completely. Your soulmate looked back at the message, then at the sealed letter. 2 paths had suddenly appeared in front of them, and neither one felt accidental. One contained words written before this moment. The other was arriving right now. They finally opened the envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper. No long explanation. No apology. Just a few handwritten lines. I don't know if you still want to hear from me. I don't know if I have the right to ask for another chance to be understood. But there is something I need you to know. The hardest part was never losing you. It was believing that you had stopped caring while I was still carrying everything I never said. Your soulmate read the sentence twice. Then a third time. Something about it felt different from an ordinary confession. It did not ask for sympathy. It did not demand forgiveness. It simply revealed a truth that had been hidden beneath months of uncertainty. They continued. I kept waiting for the perfect moment to explain myself. Eventually, I realized there may never be a perfect moment. So if this reaches you, please don't read it as a request. Read it as the truth I should have given you sooner. Your soulmate lowered the page. For the first time, they understood that this was not about convincing anyone to return. It was about removing the weight of a misunderstanding. And yet the letter still had another page. They turned it over. There was only one sentence. I was not afraid that you would reject me. I was afraid that you would accept me before I had learned how to stop running from what I felt. Your soulmate closed their eyes. That sentence explained something they had never been able to name. The mixed signals. The sudden warmth followed by distance. The moments when you seemed completely present, followed by days when you became unreachable. It had looked like uncertainty about them. Now it sounded more like uncertainty within yourself. But just as your soulmate began to process this new understanding, the person sitting across from them said something unexpected. There's one thing I didn't tell you. Your soulmate opened their eyes. What? I wasn't the first person they talked to. The revelation landed sharply. Who was? The answer did not come immediately. Instead, the person reached into their bag again and removed a small photograph. It was old. Not ancient. Not faded beyond recognition. But old enough to belong to another chapter of your life. Your soulmate took it carefully. And there you were. Smiling. Standing beside someone they had never seen before. The person beside you looked familiar. Not because your soulmate knew them personally, but because they had seen that face somewhere before. Their expression changed. Wait. They looked closer. I know this person. The room went still. The photograph had connected two parts of your story that had always seemed unrelated. The person beside you was someone your soulmate had once believed had nothing to do with your relationship. But they had been wrong. This person had been there during the period when everything between you and your soulmate began changing. And now the question was no longer whether someone had influenced what happened. It was why. The person across from your soulmate finally explained. They were the one who convinced them not to send you that message. Your soulmate's eyes widened. What message? The one you never received. Suddenly, the past rearranged itself. There had been a night when your soulmate remembered checking their phone again and again, waiting for something that never arrived. They had assumed you had chosen silence. But apparently, you had written. You had almost reached out. And someone had persuaded you to wait. Your soulmate looked at the photograph again. Why would they do that? The person sitting across from them shook their head. That is what I don't understand. A strange discomfort settled over the room. Because not every hidden truth was comforting. Some truths were simply necessary. Your soulmate folded the photograph carefully and placed it beside the letter. They could have left then. They could have decided they had heard enough. Instead, they asked the question that had been waiting underneath everything else. Did they ever regret listening to that person? The answer came softly. Every day. Your soulmate looked down. And did they ever find out why that person told them not to contact me? Yes. A pause. That's the part you need to understand. Your soulmate waited. The person leaned closer. They believed you were about to make a decision that would change your life. Your soulmate frowned. What decision? They shook their head. I can't tell you that. Why? Because they should tell you themselves. For the first time, your soulmate became frustrated. You've already told me so much. Why stop now? Because this isn't my story to finish. That answer silenced them. And perhaps there was wisdom in it. There are truths that can be explained by another person, and truths that must be spoken directly by the one who lived them. Your soulmate looked at their phone again. Your message was still waiting. I think we need to talk. They typed a response. Then stopped. Deleted it. Typed again. Stopped once more. Finally, they wrote. Where? The reply arrived almost instantly. Somewhere quiet. Your soulmate stared at the screen. Not tomorrow. Not next week. Tonight. The person across from them noticed their expression. You're going? Yes. Are you ready? Your soulmate thought about the letter. The photograph. The message. The years of unanswered questions. Then they said something neither of them expected. No. But I think I'm finally willing to listen. That evening, the city seemed unusually calm. Streetlights reflected across wet pavement. Cars moved through intersections in slow streams. Storefronts were closing one by one, leaving warm rectangles of light behind glass. Your soulmate arrived first. They chose a table near the window. For several minutes, they watched every person entering the room. Then the door opened. You walked in. For a moment, neither of you moved. There was no dramatic music. No perfect speech. No cinematic declaration. Just two people standing several feet apart, carrying years of things they had never said. You looked different. Not unrecognizable. Just quieter. Older in a way that had nothing to do with age. Your soulmate stood. You walked toward the table. Hi. One word. And somehow it carried everything. You sat across from each other. Neither spoke immediately. Then you looked at them and said, I heard you met someone close to me. Your soulmate's expression changed. So you knew? I knew they were going to talk to you. Did you send the letter? Yes. Why didn't you give it to me yourself? You looked down. Because I didn't know if you would let me finish. That answer disarmed them. You continued. I thought if I tried to explain everything face to face, I would become afraid again. Afraid of me? No. You looked directly into their eyes. Afraid of what I would finally admit. The words stayed between you. Your soulmate leaned back. What are you admitting now? You took a slow breath. That I spent too much time trying to protect myself from losing you, that I never realized I was also creating the distance I was afraid of. Your soulmate's eyes softened. But there was something else, wasn't there? You nodded. Yes. What happened? You looked toward the window. I found out something about myself. What? I had been making decisions based on what I thought you wanted. Your soulmate stared at you. I don't understand. I thought you wanted certainty from me. So I tried to become certain before I was ready. Then I thought you wanted distance, so I gave you distance. Then I convinced myself you had moved on, and instead of asking you, I accepted the answer I was most afraid of. Your voice became quieter. I was living inside assumptions. Your soulmate looked down at the table. So was I. For the first time that evening, the tension began to loosen. But then you reached into your bag. You pulled out another envelope. This one was smaller. And unlike the first letter, this one had no name on it. Your soulmate noticed your hesitation. What is that? You looked at the envelope for several seconds. It contains the reason I disappeared. Their expression changed. You said you disappeared because you were scared. I was. Then what's in the envelope? You swallowed. Proof that there was something happening behind the scenes that neither of us understood. Your soulmate became completely still. You placed the envelope on the table. I found it only recently. What is it? You didn't answer. Instead, you pushed it slowly toward them. Your soulmate reached for it. But before they could open it, you said, "Whatever you find inside, please remember one thing." They looked up. What? I never stopped choosing you. Your soulmate's fingers tightened around the envelope. Then you added the words that changed the meaning of everything that had happened before. I just didn't know that someone else had been trying to make sure we never got the chance to choose each other. The envelope opened. And inside was a message from years ago. Not from you. Not from your soulmate. From the person who had once convinced you to stay silent. Your soulmate read the first line. Then their face went completely pale. Because the message began with a confession neither of you had ever expected. I lied to them about why you left. My beloved child. For a moment, your soulmate could not move. The sentence remained on the page. I lied to them about why you left. Everything that had happened before seemed to gather around those words, the unanswered messages, the sudden distance, the years of guessing, the conversations that ended before they reached the truth. Your soulmate looked up at you. Who wrote this? You already knew the answer. The person in the photograph. Silence settled over the table. Your soulmate read the message again. The writer admitted that they had believed they were protecting you. They had watched you struggle with uncertainty and convinced themselves that separating you from your soulmate would give you time to regain control of your life. But they had made one terrible assumption. They had assumed your soulmate was the source of your confusion. They were wrong. The truth was much simpler and much more painful. You had been overwhelmed by your own fear, and instead of helping you face it, they had helped you avoid it. The message explained that your soulmate had been told you no longer wanted contact. You had been told that your soulmate was moving forward without you. Both stories were false. Neither of you had chosen the separation. You had simply been given different versions of reality and trusted information that should never have been trusted. Your soulmate lowered the paper. So all this time. You nodded. I thought you had chosen to leave. And I thought you had chosen to forget me. The realization did not create anger. It created something quieter. Grief for the time that could never be returned. Your soulmate looked toward the window. How long did you know? I found out recently. Why didn't you come to me immediately? You smiled sadly. Because knowing the truth didn't erase the damage. I needed to know whether I wanted you back because I missed the past, or because I was ready to build something different. Your soulmate considered those words carefully. And what did you decide? You looked directly at them. I don't want the past back. They seemed surprised. You continued. I want the chance to meet you again without all the assumptions we carried before. Something changed in your soulmate's expression. That was the answer they had needed. Not a promise that everything would magically become perfect. Not a guarantee that nothing would ever hurt again. Just honesty. The kind that did not demand certainty before taking the first step. Your soulmate reached across the table, but stopped before touching your hand. You noticed. So you closed the distance yourself. Your fingers met. Neither of you spoke. There are moments when words become unnecessary because two people finally understand what words had failed to explain. The person who had interfered in your story was not suddenly transformed into a villain. They had made a serious mistake. They had tried to protect you without understanding what protection actually required. And when confronted, they admitted it. They apologized. Not with excuses. Not by asking to be forgiven immediately. They simply acknowledged that fear had made them interfere with something that belonged to two other people. Your soulmate accepted the apology eventually, but with boundaries. Because forgiveness does not mean pretending something never happened. It means refusing to let what happened control what comes next. And that became one of the most important lessons of your entire story. You and your soulmate could not rewrite the years behind you. But you could stop allowing those years to write the future. The following weeks were not filled with dramatic declarations. They were filled with small things. Honest conversations. Unhurried walks. Questions that once would have been avoided. Moments when one of you became uncertain and actually said so instead of disappearing. There were awkward silences. There were misunderstandings. There were moments when old fears tried to return. But something was different now. You talked. When your soulmate wondered whether you were pulling away, they asked. When you felt overwhelmed, you said it. When something hurt, neither of you turned it into a secret. The relationship became less about reading signs and more about listening to words. And slowly, something beautiful happened. Trust stopped being something you hoped would appear. It became something you practiced. One day, months later, your soulmate asked about the first conversation with the person close to you. What was the most important thing they told me? You smiled. They told you that I cared. Your soulmate shook their head. No. That wasn't the most important thing. You looked curious. What was? They helped me understand that I had been waiting for you to prove something you were too afraid to say. You looked down. And what were you waiting for? Your soulmate smiled. I was waiting for you to choose me. You remained quiet. Then they added. But now I understand something. What? I don't need you to choose me because you're afraid of losing me. Your eyes filled with emotion. I want you to choose me because being with me feels honest. And that was the moment the entire story finally made sense. The hidden message. The photograph. The conversation. The letter. The years of distance. None of it was really about some mysterious force separating two people. It was about fear, assumptions, silence, and the damage created when people try to guess what another person's heart is saying. But love, when it is healthy and sincere, does not ask you to become a mind reader. It asks you to become honest. And perhaps that is what this fictional story leaves behind for anyone listening tonight. Sometimes the person you love is not waiting for a perfect sign. They may simply be waiting for honesty. Sometimes the distance between two hearts is not created by a lack of feeling. It is created by two people protecting themselves at the exact same time. Sometimes someone close to you may misunderstand your situation, and sometimes you may misunderstand someone else's. But the truth has a way of becoming clearer when people finally stop defending their assumptions and start asking real questions. Your soulmate did not return because the universe forced them to. They returned because two people finally became willing to have the conversation they had avoided. And that is what made the ending meaningful. Not destiny controlling their choices. Not a promise that everything would be effortless. But two human beings deciding that whatever happened next, they would no longer make decisions for each other in silence. You looked at your soulmate one evening as the sun disappeared behind the buildings. The sky was turning gold. They reached for your hand. This time, there was no hesitation. I wish we had known sooner, they said. You smiled. So do I. Would you change everything? You thought for a moment. Then you answered. I would change the silence. Your soulmate nodded. Me too. And perhaps that was enough. Because the most beautiful ending was never going to be the discovery that everything had been secretly perfect. It was the discovery that something imperfect had survived long enough to be understood. The story had begun with a conversation you did not know was happening. It had passed through misunderstanding, hidden information, regret, and an unexpected revelation. But it ended with something much more valuable than a dramatic reunion. It ended with clarity. So if you are listening to this story and there is someone in your life you have been trying to understand from a distance, remember this. Do not build an entire future from an unanswered question. Do not turn silence into a verdict. Do not assume that someone's fear means they do not care. And do not forget that your own heart deserves honesty too. Sometimes closure is a goodbye. Sometimes it is an apology. Sometimes it is a new beginning. And sometimes closure is simply the moment you finally understand why the old version of the story could never make sense. May you be given the courage to speak when silence has become too heavy. May you recognize the difference between genuine love and fear disguised as protection. May the people meant to remain in your life meet you with honesty, patience, and respect. May you have the wisdom to release what was never yours to carry, and the strength to welcome what arrives with peace instead of confusion. And if someone you love is walking through their own uncertainty, may you remember that you do not have to chase, force, or manipulate the outcome. Let truth have room to breathe. Let people make their own choices. Let genuine connection reveal itself through consistent actions. And most of all, let your heart become a place where honesty is safer than pretending. Because sometimes the greatest surprise is not discovering that someone still cares. It is discovering that after everything you thought had been lost, there is still an opportunity to begin again with clearer eyes, stronger boundaries, and a more honest heart. If this story touched something deep inside you, don't rush past it. Take a quiet moment and ask yourself what truth you have been afraid to speak. And if you believe someone else needs to hear this message of hope, share it with them. Subscribe for more cinematic spiritual stories, and stay with this journey, because the next story may speak to a part of your heart you haven't found words for yet. Until then, may peace follow you into every unanswered conversation, may wisdom guide every decision, and may whatever is truly meant for you arrive with clarity instead of confusion. You do not have to force what is real. What is real can meet you in the light.